Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1579A, and today's date is May 29th, 2018, and the title of the episode is, We Have Just Seen the Beginning of the Economic Meltdown. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've been talking a lot about cryptocurrency, on who created it, who's going to control it, what is it going to be used for, should we not use it? It's a central banking system. They have full control of everything. Even the founder of the world's second biggest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, has asked the question whether the central banking community, whether their control is extended into the cryptocurrency realm. And they're asking about the IMMO blockchain project. They're talking about all different things. And we need to understand something that's very important right now. And when we look at everything, we can't just say, oh, the central bankers control it. Oh, it's created by the NSA, so they can control everything, and everything is just controlled. Think about the internet for a second. Now, everyone's going to say, well, it's controlled. Well, certain parts of it is controlled. Yes, they can control social media like YouTube. They can have an influence. They can team up with the developers. They can do whatever they need to do, try to control YouTube and gather data. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with Google search engine. But that's not the internet. Those are pieces that lay on the internet. Just like cryptocurrency, just like the blockchain. Bitcoin is just one piece. Ethereum is just one piece. Ethereum, yes, makes up a lot of the coins. It's part of the coding, but same thing with HTML. That doesn't mean you have full control over it. Now, there are many people out there that have websites, and they put their websites up, they pay a host, or they can set up a server in their house and have a connection coming right into their house, and guess what? Nobody can control it. The same thing with the blockchain. The central bankers, they're not looking to control the blockchain itself. First of all, it'd be very, very difficult to do. Secondly, they want just to control a coin, and they want everyone to use that coin. That would be their end game. And just like the internet with, let's say, the alternative media, they never thought on the internet the alternative media was going to gain ground. They never thought it'd be possible. They had the corporate media, they had control, and they thought everyone would continually use the corporate media, and that's where you get your news. And then the alternative media came along, and all of a sudden, they had a problem. What they're trying to do now with Bitcoin and other coins that are out there, they're trying to drive people away from it because they want, really, in the end, to create their own coin. And they want governments to acknowledge their coin and say these are going to be the coins. Just like the Federal Reserve came out with the Federal Reserve note. And they forced everyone into that piece of paper. All the other pieces of paper they can care less about. Somebody else can create it. Somebody else can create something where you can trade in gold, physical, and physical silver. You can do that. They don't care. But the government is saying this is the currency you need to use for all transactions here in the U.S. And you have to pay your taxes using the Federal Reserve note. The same thing with the cryptocurrency market. Strip away the technology part and all that other stuff. They just want their coin, and they want governments to accept it. Then they want everyone in that coin. This is why they've been demonizing everything else. You just can't say they can control everything. And it doesn't really matter who created it because it's laying on a system and there are many pieces to it, just like the internet, and there's many different functions to it. And when you look at this, you can see how this is laid out. And they don't want it's quite impossible to control something like this, just like the internet. There's no one controlling my website. I built it. I put it up there. I moved it 3 or 4 times, and I have full control over it. Actually, if I wanted more control, I would get a line that's coming into my home. I would set up a server and host it myself if I wanted complete full control over it. Well, cryptocurrencies, you have offline wallets. You can control. You don't have to be on an exchange. You don't have to do any of that. You can control all that. So we see right now that it'd be very, very difficult to control every aspect of it. And that's not really what they want to do. That wouldn't benefit them. What they really want is they want their own little coin where everyone is pushed into, where they can say this is the official coin. Everything else they don't care about. And that's what they've done with paper currency. And we can see right now, this is the battle. The people against the central bank. If the people say, listen, we don't want to go with the central bank currency, well, the people have to stand up and they have to say no more central bank. If there's enough people around the world that do this, the central bank goes down the tube. And we will be making this transition one way or another. We will be going into a different currency, and we want it to be a controlled people's currency without the central banking system. We see Shiller right now is reporting from their 20-city composite home price index that prices of homes, they are rising very, very quickly. Now, this is very interesting because they have surpassed the July 2006 record high. We're past that right now. And we're about 3.8 times higher than the everyday worker pay, which means the younger first-time home buyers, they're going to have a very difficult time purchasing a home because we're seeing a huge amount of inflation in homes where they're pumping up the bubbles and wages aren't keeping up. And this is going to be a major, major problem. And it's going to hurt the real estate industry. And as the interest rates rise, the same thing's going to happen. It's going to kick a lot of these individuals that aren't making a lot of money right out of the market because they can't keep up with the prices of homes. And if we look around the country, we can see how out of whack this is. I mean, go to Los Angeles. It's 122% over the national level of incomes. If we look at San Francisco, it's 107%. New York is 95% above. This is completely unaffordable for the next generation, and that's what this is all about. It's the next generation. And if we go back in time, we can see that each generation, it got harder and harder and harder as time went on. And here we are at the end game, and it's very difficult for people. If we go back to the beginning in 1970 or even prior to that, well, we didn't really see much inflation when we were on the gold standard. We saw inflation right after we came off of the gold standard and they started to create a lot of currency. That's where we saw the inflation. If you look at 1970s going into the 80s, housing prices, boom, they just went up very, very high. If you look at wages, boom, they had to be readjusted because of what was happening. Now we're at the opposite end. Wages are not moving up as quickly. Actually, they're declining in many areas. But the housing prices, they are continually being pushed up. The stock market is continually being pushed up. This is being done because people feel good when the housing prices are at their highest. People feel good when the stock market is very high. And it used to work where everything was great because wages were keeping up. But we're at the point now where they've disconnected. And now the everyday person who's coming out of college, trying to get a job, they cannot make that income. And you see this at the end stage of an economy that is breaking down, where they can't raise interest rates, where wages, they're pretty much flatlined, where we see bubbles all over the place, and bubbles are popping. People can't afford things because what happens is you keep creating this currency over and over and over, and before you know it, it devalues the currency, and they call this inflation, and it takes a lot more of those dollars to afford anything. And this is why we're going to see this completely get out of control as time goes on. Now, we just talked about this yesterday about the Italian banks, and we talked about how they're in really big trouble. Most of these banks are completely insolvent. The central banks have been propping them up, and they are imploding right now. And it's just funny that we just talked about this yesterday. I mean, Italy, they woke up to a sheer selling panic. Now, we talked about this yesterday, where everyone's going to be looking at the situation. There are going to be margin calls. There are going to be all these things happening, and people are going to start to sell. And we saw a huge sell-off, which mutated into a full-blown liquidation avalanche, led by a furious repricing of the BTP curve, where 2-year yields exploded another 170 basis points higher on the day, rising to 2.60% from a negative just a few days ago. Now, this is a complete and utter disaster. Now, we haven't seen anything like this since the days of the European sovereign debt crisis in 2011-2012. And what happened was dealers, they pulled their price indication. Dealers were unwilling to trade, given the excessive volatility. And what we're seeing right now is going to get a lot worse because yesterday we reported on how there are many, many other banks that are tied into the Italian. One of them being Deutsche Bank. Well, their stock just tumbled, and it's a complete and utter disaster. We know they're laying off a lot of people, and this is going to spread beyond Italy's borders, and it's going to get a lot worse. And this is just the beginning stages of the economic meltdown. Now, will the central banks step in, and will they create more currency and help these banks out? Maybe they will. But what we can see from all of this is that everything is starting to break down right now. And the central banks, what's going to happen is they're going to go into overdrive. Instead of unwinding, cutting QE, they're going to switch gears and they're going to create more QE because they start to realize what is happening here. And they're going to try to save these banks and save what is happening because they want to be in control of this whole thing coming down. And I believe what's happening here is there's holes in the dam and they're putting fingers on the dam and they're trying to hold everything together, and it's all falling apart. Remember, they've been telling us that these banks are strong. You don't have to worry about the derivative market. Everything is great. The economy is fine. We're going to start to unwind. We don't need the QE anymore. Well, everything's falling apart very, very quickly. And they're going to have to try to stop it or just let it go. If they let it go, the world is going to be looking at the central banks saying, what just happened here? You told us it was contained. You told us everything was fine, that the economy was strong and we can raise rates now and we can unwind. But we can see this is not true. We can see that it's all breaking down very, very quickly. And again, the central banks, they don't want to aim for this. And this is going to spread. They might put a Band-Aid over it. They might put a little patch on the dam and stop that leak, but there's going to be another one opening up. And before you know it, all these holes are going to start spouting out water and they're not going to be able to stop it. And the dam's going to come down. And we can see this is just the beginning of the economic meltdown. It's almost like if we go back to 2008, where they saved Bear Stearns and they said everything is contained, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, Lehman Brothers, AIG, the auto industry, and everything just started to fall apart. The same thing's going to happen, and we're going to be going through a transition. The transition is going to come. The debt that is out there cannot be sustained. Their system, and I'm talking about the central banking system, only lasts for a certain period of time, then it dies, and they have to restart it. That's where we're headed right now. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that we restart it without the central bank. We need to restart it with we the people. And the central bank needs to be pushed out. We don't need them. They don't benefit we the people. All they do is enslave the people into their system. And there's really no escape from their system. And if you really think about it, the only escape right now that people have had is gold and silver, which they suppress. But you could still use it if you really wanted to trade. It's just a little difficult to use. But then you also have cryptocurrency, which is an electronic form, which is outside of their system, where you can use it to purchase and trade and whatnot. And you can see right now, this is what they're mostly afraid of, that we will transition away from their system. And this is what they're trying to stop. They want to keep us in their new system, whatever it's going to be. And I'm sure they have plans on convincing governments to go with their new system. But the people around the world, they need to start waking up. People need to start to realize that we don't want the centrals. We don't want their system. We will control our own system. We don't need a private corporation. We don't need the Rothschild. We don't need any of them. They don't benefit us. So get prepared, get ready, because a transition is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.